Hey everybody. Sorry, we're 1 minute late, I think.
How's that?
Welcome to the show. Hey Nicole, Chris, Ian,
Chris
you're
Reese.
here. That's good.
We'll bring you on
Hey
in a
Pat,
minute.
I
It's
haven't seen
all
you in a while.
no, it's been like about 30 seconds. So it's all your fault we started late because you were babbling on about something.
I
I can't
know we
remember
were
what it
just,
was.
yeah, I know. Well, good to see everybody. So we are, and Ian, we're gonna ask you about this. We're as most of you know, HR Tech's happening, and there's incredible speakers for 3 days, Pat, 3 or 4 days, I guess,
I
until
think it's
tomorrow.
three. Yeah, I think I said it's 4 full days.
Three. Some great keynotes later today. Catch Jason Averbook. He's at 4:45 Eastern time zone. I'm excited about that. So if you haven't, it's pretty easy to register. Just go to hrtechnologyconference.com. But today, right now, there's a really great speaker uh, happening live on HR Tech, and it happens to be Ian Cook. So Ian, we're going to ask you about this because we don't know. Everyone knows this stuff's pre-recorded, so we're being playful. But I here's the thing, Ian, your fan base, your posse is going to have to choose HR Tech or Radical. So I don't know.
We'll
This is
see. We'll see where they fall. But I was actually excited to imagine that Ian had figured out how to bend the space-time continuum. I thought
I
maybe
know
he's able to be in two places at once. We'll have
he
to ask him
might be.
about
Well,
that.
if we have him, if he's sort of going back and forth, looking at one screen, looking at our screen, then we'll know. So who's we have who's new to the community? Who's the first time joining us? If you just put into the chat, say hi, or for first time. Looks like
And even
there's a few
and
few new
put your city
names.
where you are too, or location is always fun too.
Yeah, that's always good to see. And I will say, and some of our regular folks, we've been having some issues with Crowdcast with comments. I have a tech ticket in, nothing we can do about it, but some of the comments apparently aren't working. I've had some of our friends message me and let me know they were trying to comment and nothing came through. So hopefully that doesn't happen again today. So Pat, how was St. Patty's Day for you? We're
Oh, it's a good
50%
question.
Irish, so
It was good. I actually I stopped by and did have a beer with my friend Phil Harder and his son Otto at the Sample Room, which is a little kind of restaurant bar. It's on the Mississippi River, just on the other side of the river from us. And it was interesting because the last time I was there was, I think, March 11th of last year, and I had a beer with Phil. And that was kind of like the last time I've been out and had a beer with anybody at a restaurant. But Minneapolis is starting to open up things a little bit more. They have an outdoor area there, and so we were able to kind of hang out for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. But it was nice to have a reconnection again. And, after so many virtual conversations and the experiences we've all had for the last year, I got to say there was something quite magical about staring into someone's real eyes versus their,
yeah,
you know, two-dimensional eyes rendered through some kind of
doesn't
crazy compression through, whether it's Zoom or Crowdcast or FaceTime or whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think I let's hope next year, the year from today, St. Patrick's Day is going to be business as usual. I'm hoping.
Hopefully. How about you?
Yeah,
Did you do anything for St. Patrick's Day?
yeah. No, I work. Well, we were here at the office, and I ended up working kind of late. I think I worked till about 8:30. So unfortunately, that was my St. Patty's Day.
St.
But it
Patty's
was
Day thing?
nice. It was relaxing. Um, yeah, it was a good day. But next year, it's going to be all out. We're going to go and head into St. Paul, Pat. We're going to walk the streets,
Do the
join
parade.
the parade, do the
Yeah.
parade. That's right. Well, so today as we were joking earlier, we have Ian Cook, who's also at HR Tech at the same time. We're going to really ask him about that. But we have Ian Cook, and we're really excited about this. I think this is our 8th episode, and we've talked about topics left and right and up and down, always about focusing on people and change, culture. But today we're really digging into data, right? Just the importance of data and the importance of data as we continue to focus on our mission, Pat, of humanizing the workplace and how data plays and a central role, a necessary role in that. And who better to have on than Ian Cook to talk about the great stuff that Vizier is doing, the great stuff he's doing. So I'm super excited about this conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Fun.
Ian, speaking of in person, it's always historically been great to see Ian at the HR Tech conference, in Vegas over the last few years. He's always fun to chat with because what I love about Ian is he's equal parts, one of the best data practitioners out there. He just knows the space inside and out, and he's developing products and really understands how the industry and clients think about it. But he's also a really unusual and creative thinker too, and he's got that great blend of equal parts kind of how to tell a story, how to engage you, and then he's also got the technical chops as well. And it's going to be fun to hang out with Ian here for an hour or so today and talk shop.
Yeah, in LinkedIn, I was using a quote that maybe storytelling is data with a soul. It was just a great quote. And I think, as we know, the best data is told in stories. And I think you're right, Pat. I mean, Ian really, really encompasses all of that.
He gets it. Yeah.
He gets it, right? Right. He knows data results in a story and not just numbers. So, super excited to have him on. And Pat, I noticed I'm not wearing a hat today. You're wearing a hat. I'm just calling it out. I will also call out that you're my big brother. Those who don't know, who are new, and I'm trying to catch up to you with the beard. So you're taking my hat look, and I'm catching your beard look. So it's getting
something's going on here.
Yeah. Something's going on. I don't know.
Next time you're gonna have the headphones, and I'll have the
headphones. And if I grow 3 inches in height, then I'm gonna be that's good for me. And if you start to shrink.
I think it's more like 5 inches if you think about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, you're way too tall. You're way too tall. Okay, well, I'm sure you all love hearing Pat and I have brotherly fun here, but I think we should get Ian on and get down to business. So, Ian, I am going to ask you to join, and you should have an invite coming your way to join the screen. If you're not too busy at HR Tech, you can accept this.
I feel like we're really ribbing Ian here. He's gonna.
I know. No, it's
start him out on a back foot.
It's more the recordings of HR Tech.
There he is.
Hey, gents, how you doing?
Who actually think it's live? Ian, how's it going?
It's going good. Yeah, my avatar is fully engaged over at HR Technology. I had it all programmed in. The AI is doing a really good pretense.
Pat, and you realize you and I will never be invited back to HR Tech after breaking the mystery that everything's pre-recorded.
And to be super honest, the when HR Tech came out, it has to be recorded. They mandated that this is recorded. I prefer those kinds of pure directional, here's a presentation. They are so much better recorded because I have this fantastic group behind me called marketing, who are half of the creative brilliance in Vizier. And so they make it look and sound so good.
Yeah.
Whereas the live is, it's different. I guess talking heads is a better way to go for it. So, So also HR Tech's recorded. So anybody who wants to go, I figured people would actually come for this conversation because the live conversation is cool. Anybody who wants to go and know what we're talking about HR Tech, it's recorded. Just jump in. I don't tend to attend the sessions live in HR Tech. I go find the moments in my day when I need a coffee, and I'll just go download them and have a scan on those. I've got Jason's session earmarked for reviewing at some point either later today or tomorrow, because I am, like yourselves, looking forward to his. He's always got a fresh take on stuff.
Yeah. Anything you've heard so far, Ian, that has jumped out to you? Any great presentations or topics that are pushing the envelope in an interesting way?
I think the topic that I really, really engaged in is the whole shift in the deployment of HR technology. We've spent a really long time, HR's been in this world of moving from, we just manage, not just manage admin, but the strategic HR debate's been going on for a really long time. What we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're kind of sensing from HR technology in general is that shift from your job is not just to be a record keeper. The transactional systems, the HRISs that keep those records, the wave of change is done there. They're now in the cloud. They're now super available. They're now manager self-serve. They now look nice. There is no more value to be squeezed out of change there.
Mm-hmm.
Where the change is coming from, where the value is coming from, is the application of knowledge into the technology to help a manager make a better decision, to spread a whole bunch of what HR's been doing actually into the technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is a really key pivot. When it comes to how do you actually think about your architecture. You go from thinking about, like, I need everything in one place because I want it simple, to actually I need to assemble an ecosystem of stuff that really helps. And that I see represented kind of everywhere in the talk track from analysts and the kind of applications that are being put forward. And I think we're just at the start of that adventure. So I always like adventures. It seems like it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, no, just completely agree. I mean, it's refreshing to see this. I think, we know the importance of technology is key, but we've all been saying for many years, it's how you use it, when you use it, why you use it, right? And I think we're finally getting to that place where it is, building an ecosystem of HR technology that truly adds value at a micro level, employee level, a team level, an organizational level. And I think we're really getting that now, right? So we spend the time thinking about how we're going to use this, not just, well, that's cool functionality, or that's cool integration. Like, no, this we really need this. Our people need this. Our leaders need this. So I'm just so pleased that that's happening, and that's kind of front and center with the conversation.
It is, and just to think about tech for tech's sake is not the, like you said, that's not the end of the adventure here. It's really thinking with a design eye, which is how do we bring benefits to different levels in the organization, to an individual contributor, to a manager who's running a team, to someone who's responsible for a business unit, to a senior leader. How do we help them understand what's happening, and then and also, like you said, Ian, kind of then help them figure out what to do, and in some ways it's less about, in the end, if we get this right, it's actually, the tech almost disappears more and more, but the ideas are just there when we need them, right? It ends up being more nudges and insights when we need it. And it's less about staring into a dashboard. It's more about how do you help someone, have an insight and then know what they should be doing. What's the behavior or outcome they should be doing? And it's really fun to think about, because it's a much different design initiative.
You triggered a story for me, Pat, as you were talking there, where somebody I talked to, must be going on 18 months ago now. It was an in-person meeting, so I kind of, as a sort of really strong resonant memory. I know, and it was good because it was actually in Vancouver, where I'm based, and so I was talking to the head of talent acquisition there, and they'd invited me in to talk generally about analytics in the space, and they were doing some strategizing. And she came up to me during the coffee break, which we no longer have. Like, how I missed the coffee break, because you get the best conversations. She said, "No, Ian, I'm curious, and I kind of like the notion of analytics has a purpose, because I've got 5 different requests for new technology to feed into my TA system right now. Like, I got 5 different people pushing me to buy something that they think will solve our talent acquisition problems, but I don't actually know where my talent acquisition problems are. Like, I have no way to know what's working, how the flow is going, whether this, video interviewing is going to make a difference, or whether this assessment tool is going to make a difference, or some chatbot scheduling is going to make a difference. Like, I could go and spend, $2 million on new toys, but I don't actually know if it's working. And she was compelled, kind of as you guys are highlighting, that I need to throw away the technology possibilities and really think about the experience I'm architecting, and then have as little technology as possible. And it was because I'd often seen the opposite, where people just they go grab, oh, this sounds cool, let's buy that, and then they're like, oh, we're not really using it, it doesn't really do what we thought, and it's like, oh, it doesn't really fit. So things to be aware of, and it really aligns to the designing technology to run the experience you're looking for.
That's a great quote right there. I mean, that's it. Technology has to match the experience. So I want to jump in, but before we do, Ian, we've started chatting right away, and I know there are some people on here who might not know what you do and much about Visier. So could you just give us a minute
Yeah.
or two about who you are, what you do, and who's Visier?
Yeah. So let me give you a quick potted history. I started life in soft skills, team development, leadership development, like how we shape that side of the business. And I ran into this thing that I describe as the CFO problem. I was trying to get funding for these people-oriented, enabling development type programs and strategies. And I'd seen the effect it could have on the business. Like I knew this was going to work, but I completely failed to articulate that to the CFO. Therefore, budget would be half of what we needed, or it wouldn't be forthcoming, or there'd be a level of skepticism and lack of engagement at the executive level to really drive this level of change. And I'm talking back in the 90s. So never one to back down from a challenge. Like the thing, how do we explain how people really make a difference in the business? And how do we do that so that a CFO or a CEO gets it? That led me to analytics. That was like, it's the data, it's the measurement, it's the translating the wonderful dynamics of people into some clear, explainable, and it's not always just necessarily measurable, it's explainable attributes. So that led me to building a benchmarking business across Canada in the early 2000s, which led me to Visier 8 years ago, where I basically led the development of our solution side. Visier is both an analytic application. So we can bring in any data, we can prepare it for use, get rid of all the noise, make it nice and clean and usable. And then we standardize measures and outputs so that you can start to measure things like retention, diversity, movement, change in pay. And it's all in one box. And so Visier is this synthesis of great technologists and domain experts. And so I've worked with a technologist as the domain expert to build out that product, which now serves 6,000 clients and 10 million employee records on a daily basis.
Wow.
Our scale is mind-blowing. We've turned that analytic challenge into, it's not quite a manufacturing process, but it is highly standardized, a whole level of automation, like the scale and ease with which people can consume analytics is kind of revolutionary, because our view is analytics is complex, but your application shouldn't be. So we do a lot of that work to make it consumable, accessible for real humans. Again, kind of why we're very aligned to the story of RADICL, like people first. Like you shouldn't have to have a PhD to do people analytics.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, Ian. And then sorry, you were making one final point.
No, I just think that's my background, and that's where that kind of yin and yang of social science plus finance and business sort of blend together. And it's been the passion to get the people side of the business recognized at the same level as finance. It's been happening, and the pandemic accelerated it in kind of untold ways, but it's a slow arc. And I've been working with the people who've been pushing that boulder uphill for whatever the last 30 years. And I feel like we're in a really good place.
Yeah, well, thanks for the work you do, Ian. And I can think I speak for Pat when I say this. We've number one, we've always been a big fan of what Visier's been doing, and I think it's just the commitment of storytelling with data. When someone asks me about Visier, I know that's not your not your tagline, but when I want to just quickly synthesize it, it's just simplifying a lot of complex data and quickly giving you the information, what you need to know when you need to know. So that's number one. Number two, your commitment to people and data and how you blend that is really refreshing. And that's, of course, why we wanted you on the show. We just love your perspective. And so thank you for joining us. And with that, so I guess that's a perfect lead into one of my first questions. And so we talk about humanizing work. This is kind of a regular theme of ours. And so my first question is, can we be data obsessed and continue to humanize work? And let me define what I mean when I say humanize work. This is kind of double downing on caring more, showing more empathy, listening more, right? Learning more, having conversations more. So it's that empathetic leader. It's the willingness to say, I don't know the answer, but let's figure it out together. And I will joke, I posted this morning, and Jess Von Bank from LeapGen, she responded and said, the inverse, you can't humanize work without being data obsessed. And I 100% agree. She answered the question for us. But so I guess I will, that's my first question for you. You know, when it's the commitment to humanize work, the responsibility we have to humanize work, and the opportunity we have to leverage data in smarter, more intuitive, more effective ways.
So I'm fully on with Jess that, you know, the only way I've seen people really move the needle on a people first mindset, because again, I spent a really long time with people who did it just because they cared, but that's not going to move the kind of investment that you need. It doesn't get you the dollars, it doesn't get you the buy-in, it doesn't get other people on side, and so the data isn't about, you know, informing yourself that your values and your drives are correct. In my mind, the data is actually about bringing everybody else with you. So I might use slightly different language, Dan. So you're people obsessed, data informed, and I'll share a story that I think really highlights that. It's actually happened across 3 of our clients, and it's around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's like, how does data actually? What's the opportunity? So these organizations have, as everybody has, they've seen the Black Lives Matter, they've seen the social justice movement, they've got their executive looking to be serious about the diversity initiatives and change in diversity. They're not just looking to, you know, paste some numbers out there. They're looking to drive change in diversity. So their analytics team have been looking at, you know, representation down through the levels, mobility of representation between levels. You know, which groups move, which groups don't. How does that work? And then able to engage the executive in that story. And these are different businesses in different sectors, but all of them found, you know, high diversity in our individual contributor levels, decreasing diversity as we go up the organization. And so rather than what has often been it's a knee jerk for a bunch of organizations, like, let's just go and hire more diverse people, that will solve the problem. They recognize that actually the way that they will resolve to be an inclusive and really powerful culture is to build mobility up through the business. And so, you know, it's a campaign. Like, it's not kind of a one and done. Here's the data, let's do this. Sure. Like, it doesn't work that way, but the slow campaign of, like, here's where we are, it hasn't changed. Here's where we are, it hasn't changed. Here's why it hasn't changed. Led those organizations to, you know, building pathways, understanding the need to kind of open up these pathways up through the business to follow the McDonald's model, as it were. Like, you know, anybody can become CEO and actually have that as a mindset. Test against that, put the resources against that, you know, shape the strategy around that, you know, so that person of color becomes a team lead, becomes a supervisor, becomes a manager, becomes director, becomes CEO. And they for whatever reason that wasn't happening, whether it was unconscious or unwilling or uninformed, like, who knows? I don't think there's any, you know, we're not looking for blame, but they are identifying a lack of mobility that is hurting that diversity. And so, you know, I think a huge thing I've seen about people first is everybody counts, and the data is showing that not everybody's got the same opportunity, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Forget that, data's neutral. But what do we want to achieve, and how do we want to achieve it? How do we get resources? How do we get dollars? How do we get people aligned so that it actually starts to happen? And that wouldn't happen without data. Like, you know, we need more diversity at the executive level. Great, let's hire somebody. Oh, look, they left. Like, that's just too linear. It's too simple in terms of resolving those challenges, so that the data starts to really show the impact and the approach and the power. So again, I've heard that from 3 different organizations. So it's not my doing, it's what these people are doing, which is often the voice for the great work they're doing. But that, to me, is that real opportunity of data informing how we actually put people first.
Yeah. Ian, how do we, so in that example, you talked about those 3 organizations. I mean, it's right. There's the power of data to be able to say, wow, gosh, this is the reality of where we're at. And I love the vision, the way you describe, like the McDonald's opportunity, or whatever the organization chooses to sort of basically enable everyone at the organization to have a sense of, you know, there is a way to rise here at this organization and, you know, have an amazing career, and, you know, hopefully with that, there's a lot more diversity, and in the end, the organization looks a lot more the way it should. But how do we use data to actually enable the strategy? You know what I mean? So so you talk about that starting point. Okay, here's where we're at. The CEO says, okay, all right, so and then what do we want it to look like? We want it to look like something like this. So then how do we start to use, is data part of the way we come up with the strategy, or is it just the kind of the window into seeing how the strategy is working? I know it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, but how are you seeing organizations kind of start to frame that a little bit and maybe start to drive strategy through the data itself?
It's wonderful question, Pat, and it's definitely part of how you drive the strategy itself. Because any change in a human system there's an element of behavior, there's an element of measurement, there's an element of communication, there's an element of sort of new activities. And so these organizations are then setting a time window and a target to monitor over period the next 6 months. We would, if this is working, we expect to see an increase of 5% of Asian women holding team lead positions. And it didn't happen. Well, why didn't it happen? Well, we don't know. Okay, let's go find out. And that's where the more qualitative, intimate piece comes in. I'm not in the camp of like it's all about the hard data. Like there's an element of hard data can find your problem space. It can tell you if your interventions are working, but often you might need qualitative data to understand. Well, why is that? Is it the opportunities as presented aren't resonating? It's for me, data is actually how you communicate and monitor the strategy. It's that ongoing narrative of we're getting where we want to, or we're not getting where we want to. Like it's almost the same as finance. Like our strategies to expand in a new market. Okay, how many leads do we have? How much revenue did we land? Like, is it on the trajectory that we thought? If it is, what are we doing? If it's not, why aren't we? It kind of baffles me that not everybody runs their people that way. Hence the mission.
Yeah. So just a follow-up on with that. So when we think about the McDonald's example and other organizations, the opportunity for people to accomplish whatever they set their minds to, right? So meaning, and I love that example, right? If you're committed, you have a passion, you have a vision, you join an organization, eventually you can make your way up to CEO or some C-level position. Historically, we've used data to understand our people that is a little bit transactional. And examples, performance data, right? Kind of leadership development data, engagement data. And I don't want to cut on that data. I think that data is really important, but what data sources do we need to really start paying attention to that captures more of that personal drive, an inspired person who's ready to do whatever it takes, who really believes in the organization, that we're not necessarily measuring right now? And I know this is probably a tough question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but this is, I think, what this is like the holy grail of data, right? Where do we get it from? What do we ask? How do we ask it?
Yeah, no, I love the question. It's brilliant. So there's another group that we're partnering with who are able to detect burnout from I'll use a technical word, but it's the metadata around your communication string. So they're not reading your message text. They're not, going into the email and working out what's this email about, but they're looking at, when's your first message sent? When's your second message sent? What's the last message sent in the day versus the first message versus how quickly do you respond? Like all of that information is basically, it's exhaust from your work. It's data exhaust from your work. So it's patterns of information. I like these folks and what they're doing because it's all opt-in. So when they deploy the system, the very first thing that a person has to do is like, yes, I'm prepared to have my data as part of this. They don't make it, it's not a big brother approach. It's a transparent approach, which is really important. And again, it's sort of can be fed back to people so they can actually start to recognize, their own state. So, I can actually look at my own behavior and kind of have that reflected back to me, which is powerful. And so that's one of the places where I think there's very powerful, useful insight and we have to go extremely carefully. We have to make sure that we're honoring and putting people first in the way we do that. Like, there's a whole bunch of other stuff I've seen that could kind of be really creepy about that. Like, again, I was talking to another colleague who'd come across an app which is, it's machine reading manager text and saying, oh, you're being very aggressive in this email, you're being, too soft in this email, and actually starting to do that. I had a reaction against that as a Scotsman. My tone of writing tends to be different to your average North American. So like, I have no idea. Like, the app isn't going to know that I'm Scottish. So I just have really strong reaction against, like, you can't get that far under my skin with AI. But the other stuff around, what's my work window? How am I managing it? Am I over investing? Am I under investing? Like, the feedback loops that come from that type of information. It's called passive listening, because I don't have to go ask. It's just in the flow of work.
And to jump in, Ian, I love that example, and I think it's kind of full circle to where we were talking about 10 or 15 minutes ago, which is we need to rethink the design and approach to all of this, right? So data is not just to help, be a kind of a overall controlling element, and it shouldn't just be about, where are we and then we did some work, how did we do? I mean, it serves that purpose now, but we need to rethink the design the way you just described it, which is, I'm someone who just was hired 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and I'm making this up, 24 years old, and I really like this organization, and I'm very motivated to have a great career. Help me,
Yeah.
So then so how do you get that person who comes in, the beginning of a career, and then over the next 10 to 15 years, help them learn and adapt and grow towards something that they want? Because then the benefits are designed, you've rethought everything where the benefits are designed around their growth and their intention,
Yes.
And but we need all the data though, to kind of come full circle back to the point that Jess made. We need the data in order to do that well. We need to know, we got to have that information. And now with the advent of all this kind of metadata, behavioral data that we're getting into, I think this is the next 10 to 20 years of this business, which is, and I talk about this a lot, we need to start thinking about to kind of, help people understand their behavior. But actually that sounds too technical. Help them know that they can have a great career if they want it. And then the core building block of that is their behaviors and their perceptions at that kind of atomic level. And then we're able to design toward that. It's a much different approach to how we've been doing things for the last 20, 30 years.
Totally. I got so many thoughts. I have to work out where to start. So again, part of my life, I've done executive coaching. And I think about, the role of an executive coach is often observation, reflection, feedback on behavior. It's expensive. Like, I know what I charged and great living, but like, there's no way you can do that for everybody. What technology is allowing us to do is take that same mental model and actually make it available to a lot of people. And the network thing is a great example. I've been a people leader at large teams. When somebody would join, like, one of the things I would spend a ton of time on is like, who are you talking to? Visier is a complicated business. We synthesize from raw data to, I could be talking about a safety incident analysis or sales attainment relative to a business goal, and then going back to, what field format are you using for your date? Like, so you have to be able to synthesize across a lot. Doesn't come easy. So spending time making sure that my new team members were talking to the right people in the right parts of the business. We're 500 people. We're still just to the point where I can connect to the right players. In a bigger organization, if I had an onboarding dashboard that says, this individual's joined, it looks like they're connected to these people, they're not connected to these people. You can be more intentional. Like, hey, I think coffee with so-and-so or virtual meeting with so-and-so would actually flesh out your connections in the business to get places. As we know, relationships drive your opportunities in any business. So again, understanding the often the divide between men and women and how that plays out. Like, if you can inspect it, you can reflect it back, you can actually take action to avoid the bias and the natural flow that often gets in the way. So, back to what you guys are saying, like designing that experience and thinking how the technology supports the individual and the manager gives you a different perspective on. That's why informed by the data. Like, you want to do that anyway. Technology means you can do it at scale for a lot more people than you would have in the past.
So that's really well said, and which kind of, I think, perfectly leads me into my next topic. And this is really looking at sort of evidence-based thinking and intuition. And let me sort of explain what I mean by this a little bit. And I promise we won't get too controversial with this, but we're in a time now. We all understand this, and I like to bring this up. I think we need to normalize this conversation, where we've become fearful of data sometimes, right? Because we feel like we're being watched, or it's Big Brother. Number two, some of us have learned to kind of adopt our own data, our own science, beliefs that feed and amplify what we already believe by the echo chambers and the people we surround ourselves around. And this is happening. So that becomes fact, right? And then that just feeds our instinct. So now sort of our intuition feels like it's rooted in some form of science. And so I think we as practitioners and data technologists and vendors, it's always a fine line between are we arbiters of truth? What's right or wrong, and how do we build culture around the reality that people are getting data from multiple sources, multiple places? Do we just ignore that and sort of allow people to surround themselves around the purpose and the vision of a company, and that should be where we go? Or should we pay attention and be more careful around what data we're absorbing in an organization that might be feeding personal beliefs that isn't aligned with an organization or isn't aligned with science, for example? Big question, but what are your thoughts with that?
My thoughts are that you kind of need to balance, like, the data is not the truth. I think that's often where data gets a bad rap or gets kind of misrepresented. It's like, well, what does the data say? The data doesn't say anything. It represents patterns and observations. It's a means to inspect reality. It's not reality. So I think everybody should always look at data as a representation of something that's going on. But also, our brains are wired to be either really good or really bad at intuition. And so, to manage in an agile world, like, I've seen a lot of people chase ghosts because of intuition, and that's hurt their business. So you kind of need to keep two opposing views in your mind at all time. Like, my gut is telling me go here, but I'm definitely going to check the data before I chase it with everything I've got. And I'll
Ian, one quick thing you said to me, and I'll give the mic right back to you, and it really stuck with me when we were chatting last, that a leader really, or anybody for that matter, but leaders especially, have to keep two opposing hypotheses in their mind at any given time, or more. But because, again, there is no absolute truth. You constantly have to weigh that around sort of instincts and always back it up with data. And I think that was it's a wise statement and an absolute truth.
And I think it hasn't been as prevalent, but I look at the rate of change and adjustment and competition, and what is our business going to be currently? Those who can hold those opposing views in their head and still progress are again, they're going to manage through uncertainty better than those who are questing for an answer that gives them certainty of where they're going. It's a fundamental part of how business has changed. And I was going to give you a quick example then, like that a lot of conversation, a lot of the echo chamber is talking about this wave of resignations, this huge, regrowth in the labor market, and the resignations are just going to kind of flood in. And we have benchmark data at Visier, so I can look at resignation patterns, and people have actually been resigning at a higher rate than they were in 2019, which was actually at a higher rate than 2018. So the intuition, because we see unemployment's high and people are furloughed, and like there's a lot of negativity in the labor market. In the uninformed, the intuitive view is like, well, everybody's just sheltering in place. They're all hanging onto their jobs. Like the labor market has stopped. Data is telling me that's not true. if you are under 25 and in the first 2 years of tenure with your employer, that population has stopped massively. But like that's the mobile, try it, test it, young early stage professionals. They feed a lot of jobs, but they're not that differentiating because they're still finding out like, what am I going to be when I grow up? Mid-career professionals who've got some time behind them, who can point to things they've done or capable, they're moving at will already, and they have been, like, basically since the summer. So I think it's a really pertinent example of how that echo chamber creates this, like, oh my God, we better get ready for some turnover exodus. Is like, well, if you're looking at your data, it's probably already happening, and it's not necessarily everybody, but it's certainly going to be the best people or the people who've got the most choice. And so I think it's just a great example of, how the data, you need to hold the intuition, but then say, what data do I have that confirms or denies? And it's not saying I shouldn't operate with this hypothesis, but what data do I have that confirms or denies? So it's a little more scientific, even if it's social scientific, than just, well, what does the press say?
Yeah, I love that. It's, and Pat, were you gonna say
something?
No.
I was just enjoying Ian's presentation. I was engaged. I was engaged.
So absolutely. I mean, that's such a great example, and I think that this echo chamber of what we read, or even just general stats that we might read in the press that are in many cases are used to sort of amplify a certain perspective, and it's always important at an organizational level to check their data, right? And different organizations might have different realities, different industries might have different realities. So if you have a robust data strategy and you're looking at data on a regular basis, like you said, you can still use your gut, and then you can use your instinct, and you can hold on to a belief system, but check it with data, and check it again, because things do change. Of course, things do change, and so that's just such a great example. I love that.
I'll share a slightly different example again, because again, I think it really digs into that people first. These are from a while back, but we've had organizations that hit some business reorganization. So certain business lines were shutting down and other lines were opening up. And finance came with a plan for how to adjust the headcount. People analytics team came back with this is an alternative way that we can get to the finance numbers without actually handing anybody a pink slip. So finance's plan was very mechanistic. It's like, I need to do X, so I get rid of Y people for this price, and I add X people over here for this price. Boom. They're working on it like it's an engine. I take out the turbocharger, I plug in the supercharger. Hey presto, my math makes sense, my business makes sense. Off we go. That's not an uncommon intuition from how I've seen finance groups behave. The people analytics team can say, well, here's what our natural attrition is. So, if we extend time window by 2 months, we're going to hit the same number just by stopping hiring. We haven't had to let anybody go. If that's not enough, here's some ways we could incentivize retirement, which is actually, these people may be hanging on because they're not in a financial position to retire because they're already over their retirement age. Here's another opportunity for us. Half of these people can actually go and work over here. Like, why are we letting them go and then hiring, with all the risk of culture fit and, ramp and all of that stuff, when literally we can reposition them and use their skills? Like, why are we trying to not do that? And so they won the argument. And, if you just think about how that positions HR relative to finance with the CEO is not in the press having handed out a bunch of pink slips. The business is not seen as a bad place to work because they have to furlough. And right. That to me is like, intuition versus data versus that yin and yang between money and people. And that's the right kind of balance for me. Again, those are the stories I live for, basically. That's what we're trying to make happen.
I've got a follow up to that. And when we talked, well, I guess picking up on the very notion a bit, but as a leader, developing and being adept with both being able to basically do evidence-based, be able to look at data and draw that conclusion, and also maybe, developing your intuition as a leader. And like I love this idea of kind of having two different hypotheses in your head, and it's a good way to think, right? Approach things. One of the things that's come up for us on this show time and time again is just the importance of how we develop leaders, and then how we keep hearing, in the end, great organizations just have great teams. It happens at the team level, and the organizations that do it right have a way of developing individual contributors into leaders and give them the right skills so that they really can, they're not just skilled engineers, they're people leaders, all those things that we've heard about for years. How have you seen, so how do we help, I guess is the question I have for you. How do we help people develop early on to both kind of get a look at data and also have this intuition thing? Is a part of it? I mean, I guess with Visier, one of the things that you guys do so well is being able to deliver at scale, data deeper down the organization. But how are you seeing the best organizations kind of start to develop those skills early on in a leader's development?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Pat. It's exposure to the data and the use of it in their work. Again, very few people want to go on yet another course, so I'm not sure it's about that. But we've had organizations that they built the team orientation dashboard. So manager takes on a new team. Straight away, there's a whole slew of data about the team members, their history with the business, like historically how that team has changed, which they are given day one, and so, and when I was growing up as a manager, it's like, here's your team. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go for lunch with all of them. I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna talk to them. All of that still needs to happen. But when I've got this data up front, like the questions I can ask, why I ask them, like the level I can get to in those conversations goes a whole notch deeper. So we accelerate the engagement with the team. We improve the way to build relationships. And I mean, it's a long arc problem, but the exposure to data is the first thing, and not shying away from it. Basically, and saying, "Oh, can they be trusted with data?" It's like, well, if you can't trust them with data, why are you trusting with your people?
Right.
Exactly.
Like, really?
Right. And so yeah, so well said. And I think one thing, just back to pick up a little bit on your last story too, Ian, around not having to hand out pink slips. And this is to anyone listening and out there. I think this is important for everyone to always remember. Too often, historically, if a team is not working or an organization is failing, we immediately say, well, it must be the people. It must be the team. So we'll get rid of everybody and we'll get new people. We'll get smarter people. We'll get people who are going to, drive revenue and drive profitability. And it would be like a mother and a father saying, our family's having problems. We're going to get rid of this family. We're going to fire our kids. We're going to get new kids because they're going to be a lot better. They're not going to stay out late. They're not going to, hide beers in their closet. I actually verse understanding that maybe there's something that you're doing that could help. Maybe you need to connect a little more with your kids. And I'm not a father, so I can't give too much insights there, but I do know and understand how to manage people, and typically people want to be a part of something great and want to be connected to something. And there's these soft skills within data that we need to understand. Again, maybe someone's in the wrong job. It doesn't mean they're in the wrong organization. So I just think it's so important that we look at people, with that family mindset. And really understand where can you add value. And I'm not suggesting that sometimes someone does need to move on, better for them, better for the organization. But I am suggesting we need to give it a much more holistic look and really understand, what someone's committed to, what they want to do, what the organization needs, and just find better matches. And I believe we can do this with better data and really using data to make the right decisions.
Yeah, and there's been a few goes at this from a technology perspective. I totally think you're right, Dan. Like just the rip and replace is you're kind of doing a coin toss in terms of your risk. Like if you didn't build the team right the first time, it's like why do you think it's going to be built right the second time? What are you going to do differently that means it's the case? The whole notion of the hero leader. I'm personally trying to make sure that is dead in people's minds. Like one person does not make or break success. There's actually a book called I've forgotten the name. There's a really amazing book that actually studied this I read it like 10 years ago. I will find it. I'll let people know. But they actually studied this notion that the hero makes a difference, and they don't. Like the simple story is they looked at financial experts who basically drive revenue for companies on Wall Street. They're all ranked, and then they looked at, well, what's a top-ranking individual who moved to another organization? Hero theory says, well, they'll instantly go back to being top-ranked. Only like 10% ever got back to being top-ranked again. It was all about the people they were around. It was all about the capability in the business. It's all about everything else. So this notion of I'll go steal a hero, you have a 1 in 10 chance of success. That's pretty low. Whereas dig into the team, like often performance in a team can actually be created through that, as you say, like digging into the sources of conflict, digging into the sources of tension, growing people's capacity to explore and use that, as opposed to, oh well, they just don't fit. We'll avoid the problem by trying to rebuild it. Like it's this whole notion of an ecosystem. And I think if there was one thing that every management task business should teach, organizations and people are not cars. You cannot plug and play components and have it work. Like you can't. You have to think about it as an ecosystem. So influence and levers and adjustments and learn and iterate. I think if you have that as a mental model as a leader, you then have a very different notion of your own capability. Like you have very little opportunity to influence, and you have to be very precise and careful about it. And can understand like, what do I need to then manage my team better? So it's one of the mental models I carry is like organizations are an ecosystem. And it fundamentally shifts how people look at building the technology that surrounds it, look at how they lead and manage the people within it. So maybe I'll go to Harvard and get them to do that course.
One of my really good friends and industry thought leaders always told me once, the best leaders work hard to make themselves irrelevant. And his point was, it's this anti-hero approach. The best thing you can do are empower everybody around you and give them the opportunity to succeed. And the less important you become, the better of a leader you become. And I think, and it's a really, really interesting mindset, and it always stuck with me. And I really appreciated that feedback. And it's been, I've tried to use it wisely over the years, but it really fits into with what you're saying as well, Ian.
Yeah, and there's a few apps that are kind of early stage to try and build that person-to-person connection. Yet to see the results of those, but I think you're onto something in terms of the direction of how people's experience of work is moving and how technology is going to help support that deeper understanding. So it definitely got harder over Zoom. So you probably need some help rebuilding it.
Yeah. Well, I know we have about 6-7 minutes left. So I think, I guess maybe just we can wrap up with, we've talked, I love something you said, Ian, and it's, let's be people obsessed and data informed, right? And if we do this and do this consistently, right, this is how we can continue to humanize work and focus on all those things that we've been talking about, and build a successful data analytics people strategy. So with this, we have to continue to build trust. There are trade-offs we have to make. But what should organizations be thinking about? I mean, most organizations have a data people analytics strategy in place. So what's the starting point? And when do we say it's working or it's not working? Or is it a rip and replace? Do we just evolve it? We make small minor adjustments? I know it's different per organization to organization, so this isn't sort of a sweeping statement. But for everyone on the call, what's your advice? Where do you start to dig in and start to make changes in a 2021 world?
So again, most people have some kind of data process in their HR groups. If it's just at a reporting level and people aren't consuming your reports, you kind of need to then start asking the questions like, well, why aren't people consuming the reports? Why aren't we getting follow-up questions on the reports? Why aren't we getting questions to get like the next level of detail? that kind of says you're out pushing out data, but it's not really going anywhere. The second is credibility and trust.
Yes.
One of the absolute foundations of getting traction is that, finance or CEO or business unit lead, it doesn't have to be all of them, it can just be one or two, will come to you and see you as a source of support, advice, and help, even for something simple like a headcount number. It sounds crazy, but I do a Thursday debate on LinkedIn, and we debated like, when's headcount, not headcount. Finance counts people who get paid. HR people count people when they're a bum in the seat doing work. And so headcount should be the bum in the seat doing work, because that's what the business needs. I don't need somebody on payroll who's not there. They're not making things for me. I need somebody who's sitting at a computer, a desk, or whatever, doing work. So even if it's as simple as like, we are the source of truth for headcount, that's a kind of marker that you've got the foundation. And then Lexi, my colleague Lexi Martin, who's again an avid thinker, researcher in HR technology in general, and PeopleAnalytics specifically, has started to recognize where your data starts to get out to managers. We've had this methodology like push. You push analytics to HR, who then take it to the manager, or pull. You just go straight to manager. You answer even basic questions, and that then gets the business engaged with people data. That's where they start to get traction. And again, it can be really simple things like, here's your diversity stats, and here how they compare to everybody else. A certain level of aggregation, or here's the 3 people with the highest risk of leaving your business. And, here's the 3 stay conversations that you should definitely have this month. Not necessarily prescribing what to do, because like everybody's reasons for leaving are different, and often they are external forces that you don't know about, but actually just starting to drive that. Here's some information that can help you with retention. Again, going back to what I said about people are moving jobs, because Walmart can now, Amazon can now hire anywhere in North America because they've gone fully remote. So people who are competing for your talent have changed and potentially become wealthy and aggressive, which is not an easy position. So, getting it out into people managers is a good start. And then again, getting the basic components in place around 2 or 3 things that align to the people strategy. If we're driving DEI, what is that? If we're driving in mobility internally, what is that? If we're making sure that our key players or key pieces have retention in place, then and having that cadence on those things. Mm-hmm. Then what tends to happen, we've seen this as part of this scalability challenge that often people come to Visier to overcome, is you get 3 or 4 things that are working and that people trust first, use to make decisions second, then all the other questions come in. And it can start from 3 prongs, and then there's like another 20 questions on top of that, and then there's another 100 questions, and you then get the investment, you then get the tools, you then get the kind of scope, and we've seen that explosion happen again and again inside organizations. But trust, and it doesn't have to be a moonshot project. Again, I think lots of people got caught up with like, I have to do what Google's doing. It's like, no, you don't. You just have to get the basics right. Trusted and used, the rest will then follow. You will get pulled to where you need to get to.
That's such great advice. Pat, any
No, it's just such, echoing what you said, Dan, such great advice. And Ian just talked a little bit about, because I think the other part of this that I love what you guys are doing is really trying to build a community around using data for good. And I know this is something you've been spearheading. Can you just say a little bit about that? Because I think it is this idea of sort of, in order for us to kind of build trust, we have to build trust inside organizations, but also broadly in the industry of how this information is going to be a benefit to people, right, and organizations. Yeah. So just talk a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, so our view goes right back to where we started, with this HR technology move forward. Everybody's got their core anchor transactional data system, but the number of things that you need to solve for people, be it listening, be it burnout, be it skills acquisitions, whatever, like there's just a wide range of possible applications. All of that needs to come together. And it shouldn't be hard for people to try and use best in class and feel like they've got the pain of trying to put that together. Our ecosystem partners, we're trading knowledge of what we each do, so that if we work with customers in common, the movement of data, the use of the shared insight, the shared knowledge is kind of built together. So Vizier Plus, one of our partners, is basically, yeah, we understand the data is going to flow seamless. You will be able to leverage our shared knowledge in either application. And so that's that notion of a wisdom of many, and our drive to bring together that best in class, so that each organization can answer their most current and pressing needs, but not feel like they're having to jot everywhere to try and solve for that. So, and again, all of those groups are aligned in the same notion of like, we're using people data to make people's experience of work better. And I describe that as like how people impact work and work impacts people. I think that's where people get mixed up. It's like, oh, we're just looking at how people impact work and we want to control them. It's like, you can't control people. Like there's a fundamental problem. You can't control people. They are by their nature uncontrollable. So you have to have this two-way relationship. So again, the vendors that are part of the ecosystem are all aligned to that. Like, this is about making the experience of work really great for people so that everybody thrives, business and the employees within it. So that's that's part of our overall, our bigger mission with our partners.
Love it.
Well, that's a mic drop ending. Nicely nicely stated, Ian. Well, we're at time. So and everyone do catch Ian, listen to his session on HR Tech. I feel bad we took you from it live right now, but it is recorded, like Ian said. So catch that. Thank you, Ian, for all the awesome work you do. We love our collaboration with you and our partnership with you, and I'm looking forward to great things ahead. And so really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh,
thanks so much.
Great conversation. And
thanks for having me on, Jens.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.